We look at studs and duds from the Baltimore Ravens 2022 season so far. Coming up next here on Locked On Ravens with a very special guest.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return another episode of Locked On Ravens here, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen today. We're free and available on all platforms, including over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you equate it to 10 times money on the entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. We're back here. It's a Thursday edition of Taco Thursday. It still matches up with Taco Tuesday, and that means Taco Tuesday guest is here, Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, the Ravens head into their bye week 6-3, sole possession of first place in the AFC North, and I think most importantly on that 3-game win streak.
You absolutely nail it there, Kevin. The Ravens, really, by any metric you want to look at, PFF overall team grade, number 2, DVOA, 4th. In their division, they're 1st. In the AFC, they're 3rd. When you look at EPA, when you look at third down conversion rate, when you look at turnover differential, when you're starting to look at point differential now as they're plus 39, I believe. The Ravens are a good team. They're finding their rhythm. They win 3 straight games where they run the ball well. They limit turnovers. They force turnovers. They get off the field on third down defensively. They convert on third down offensively. They don't make errors on special teams really at all. And that's a winning recipe for a team that is starting to find their rhythm.
It is. And going back to Monday night, Spencer, Baltimore wins at 27-13. You mentioned the third downs. Third down situation for the Ravens on Monday night was absolute. It was a masterpiece. They end up going 9 for 15 themselves on third down. They hold the Saints to just 3 of 11 on third down. And I know you've been looking at what you call those money downs. Talk about what you've seen there. I think it's been really great, especially back in this Monday night game.
Definitely. It feels like Lamar Jackson on the offensive side of the football, I would say, over the course of his career, has he made some strides mechanically? Absolutely. Has he done some things differently? Yes. In 2021, he comes out, pushes the ball downfield, just has a wider base, feels like he's using his height and his length to throw the ball from a more tall kind of platform ultimately, and did some nice things. This year is the year where he has taken more of a mental leap, I would say, in terms of pre-snap, in terms of understanding that he can lose battles to win wars. Taking sacks is okay. And we did see a crux in the other direction where kind of lost the game against the Giants about a month ago in 4 plays, more or less, and throws a horrible interception at the end of a game. He's kicking himself after, says they'll go back, they'll fix it. And they have. And you see a Lamar Jackson that is so in tune with the rhythm of the game and the pace, and feels like still not quite starting to, but starting to trust his defense to an extent to go get him the ball back in some senses, and living to die on third down in situations. So they've done a good job running the ball. He's been able to spread the ball out. Mark Andrews being out a couple games feels like a silver lining for him to get some rest, hopefully to heal up, and then getting other guys reps, hopefully increasing kind of their wavelengths and synapses firing the same way that Lamar Jackson's are downfield. We see Deshaun Jackson worked in. We see James Prochet make a couple big first down catches. Demarcus Robinson's looked really good. All kinds of great things there for the Ravens offense. So being able to have that synergy of complementary football, knowing that the defense will get the ball back, that you can rely on them to keep the score low enough that you just need 2 or 3 drives, really. And to cap off, you need 2 or 3 touchdowns probably throughout the course of a game with 9, 10 possessions where you can go make hay. And this defense will keep you in the game, keep it out of the 30s, keep you in the low 20s or teens. And Lamar Jackson with a good offensive line and starting to trust some of these younger receivers a little bit more. Obviously, the run game's there. It's just, again, it's a winning recipe for a team that is now going to face a really easy schedule on the back half of the season after facing somewhat of a gauntlet against some really good teams. When you look at DVOA or any of those things, the Bills, the Bengals, the Bucks, all these teams that are pretty darn good, the Giants, the Jets, all these teams. So Patriots even, are average or above average team in terms of those metrics. So it's been tough. They've worked through some kinks. They've worked guys back into the rotation, and it's really starting to feel like they're firing on all cylinders, and it's showcasing itself on those money downs, those third downs.
Yeah, and it's such a big momentum shift both ways when you're talking about the offense, when you're talking about the defense too, and it's great. But Spencer, let's stick with defense. Let's talk about Roquan Smith a little bit. Made his debut on Monday night, and he showed a lot. He showed the ability to stick with Alvin Kamara in coverage on that one play. He stuffed him a couple times, second and third down back to back there. How impressed, or not if you weren't, were you with Roquan Smith?
Super impressed, and watching the way that they're able to kind of use Patrick Queen and Roquan Smith to use one to create, and it looked like really Patrick Queen is going to be kind of the bumper car or the minister of chaos that is going to go attack a gap. It feels like he's been into his film study, especially in the run game, in a really great way this year, and is with it in terms of plays. So allowing him to be the one that shoots the gap, attacks, widens the gap, and clears the path for Roquan Smith to then in turn probably avoid a block or having to take on a block, which he can do. He slips them a lot, but then work downhill through trash, which he does so well. That's how you become the NFL's leading tackler, and someone that is posting such ridiculous tackling statistics is because you can work through trash well. You can sift through traffic to go end plays. So watching Queen do that, watching Roquan Smith go make plays underneath, watching the way that Roquan Smith, even more than Queen, and maybe really even more than anyone the Ravens have, I would maybe, I guess, put Marlon Humphrey and maybe a Kyle Hamilton, maybe a Marcus Williams in this category, but Smith probably the best at being able to just be an elite athlete, matching ball carriers underneath. Alvin Kamara slips out of the backfield. He can end the play. That is not something that a lot of guys in the NFL can do in a one-on-one situation with Kamara, one of the most elusive players of the last decade. So I think it's been really fun to see. Roquan Smith is a proficient blitzer, a proficient pass rusher. And in the world, the realm, the philosophy of positionless defense, having someone that can drop, that can rush, that can match, that can drop into zones, all those things. When you're talking about Chuck Clark, you're talking about Geno Stone, you're talking about Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, Patrick Queen, Tyus Bowser, Odafe Oweh drops into coverage a bit. Then it's just creating more possibilities for offenses. And in turn, we're not seeing them blitz a ton. They pick and choose their spots. They don't blitz, it's not that they don't blitz at all, but they simulate pressure. They rush four. They overload one side, force the quarterback's hand, force the quarterback to hold the ball, go through his first read to his second read. And then we're seeing guys like Justin Houston and Calais Campbell get home because of it. So it's really enhancing that defense, having a guy like Roquan Smith that can, on first and second down, go end plays. And then on third down, help to create chaos, help to create confusion and dissension for opposing passers.
Yeah, I think his fit so far, it's only been one game, obviously, but it's been great. And I think, as he talked about after the game, him getting up to speed on the playbook during the bye week is going to help him out a lot. And he said it's going to be scary, and I believe him. I think it'll be really good for him, especially there were a couple of weird sequences for as good as the game was. A couple of weird sequences, one on offense, one on defense, where you have on offense the red zone, I'd just say a botched possession where you have the play clock, as we have seen before, going 3, 2, 1, 0. Lamar Jackson gets frustrated. He spikes the ball, has an animated conversation with Ronnie Stanley on the field, and is clearly frustrated about it. Then on defense, the Juwan Johnson touchdown where Marcus Peters, again, has him on the sideline, doesn't really work him out of bounds. Chuck Clark is right there, and instead of maybe just giving him a little tap or a little shove, just kind of points at the sideline, and Johnson runs by him. And there is controversy whether he stepped out or not, but it was called a score. So what's your take on both those situations?
It is a good problem to rear its head ahead of the bye week. Operations, the basic fundamental aspect of being able to cover the ball, make sure that you're covering tackles, lining up correctly, having some sort of urgency, getting to the line of scrimmage. And I think that this is an area, honestly, where in the past, Greg Roman, I would say it felt like has been a culprit, not getting plays in. And we see Lamar Jackson sometimes looking up to the sky, like where Greg Roman is in the press box, get the play in. This isn't the case. The players this year are not hustling to the line of scrimmage, and they're unsure who's coming in motion, who's going to be doing what. And we did see Jackson try to do a little bit too much at times, check into things, check some things. But at the end of the day, what happened on that possession? So it was the Ravens were, I believe, up 17-6 at that point. They run the ball down. Kenyon Drake, Lamar Jackson has a 17-yard rush, and then Kenyon Drake has a 5-yard rush. It's 2nd and 5. The Ravens get a delay of game. Then they end up getting confused again. Assignments are missed. Kenyon Drake loses 4 yards. It is 3rd and 14. They struggle getting to the line again. Jackson throws an incompletion to Likely, which did carry him off of Likely's hands and almost into a defender's lap. It did not. But I would say that Jackson didn't put the ball in danger ultimately. And what did the Ravens do? Kicked a field goal. Then in the fourth quarter, it is 20-6. And just as I said previously, what happened in turn? You can not turn the ball over, give the other team the ball. One play later, Justin Houston gets an interception. The Ravens have the ball at the 17-yard line, and then they proceed to calm down and go punch it in. So not turning the ball over, calming down in those situations. There's an adage that I always mess up, but I really love. It's essentially making the wrong decision with confidence is better than hesitating to make the right decision many times or oftentimes. And getting to the line with 5 seconds left and trying to check, too much. Can't do that. Operations, you're sowing doubt and panic and confusion trying to make these very frantic late checks and adjustments, but didn't turn the ball over. So as long as the quarterback doesn't turn the ball over, everything's okay. You might need to assess, okay, we got to the line with 5 seconds. Hey, it's late in the game. We have a lead. We can call a timeout. And they did take a timeout on that drive earlier. They were struggling, I believe, with 11 minutes and 7 seconds left. They took a timeout, but you can take another one. At that point, you're up. Just make sure everybody calms down and takes a breath. If you don't have time, you can't make a million checks. So going into the bye week, what are the Ravens going to work on offensively? Operations. Defensively, it was lazy, and Marcus Peters really just continues to try and pull at the ball a lot, which can result in some good plays. It can also result in guys not getting pushed out of bounds, and then Chuck Clark being unsure if they're out of bounds. I will say and I appreciate the Ravens, trying to have each other's backs, and John Harbaugh, and they'll make this comment. Well, he didn't want to get a 15-yard penalty. Isn't that better than letting him run unabated into the end zone? So in that split second, it's tough, and I get it. Player safety, this, that, and the other. They're up. It is what it is. It's a lazy rep, and I don't think there's too much to read into it, but would love to see, Peters just later in games and in some situations just make the tackle, push him out of bounds a little more. Don't worry. You didn't need to force a fumble. You already got the turnover on the previous possession. It's just part of the finishing aspect and not getting bored and feeling like you need to, do something fun as opposed to just winning the game. They're completely ripping the Saints' heart out for most of this game defensively. And that was kind of a fluky touchdown. So I don't think there's too much to read into it about, but, they didn't like to see it. Peters was heated afterwards. Clark was heated afterwards. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's not like these are franchise altering issues where it's 2 months to solve it. This is very easily fixable. It's I don't want to call it necessarily an effort thing. I guess it is to an extent, but they just have to throughout the entirety of the games, consistency, doing it the whole way. So, but I think this was the closest thing we've seen all year to a front to back dominant performance the entire way, which I think is great heading into the bye week. It would have been a lot less fun talking about a loss and having the Ravens, all these questions heading into the bye week, but it feels like now they're hitting their stride. And coming up in the second segment, we'll be diving into studs from the offensive side of the ball, talking about Lamar Jackson. We'll also talk about some duds, so stay tuned for all that. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BlueNile. And whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, BlueNile can help you make celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, BlueNile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and pieces priced significantly below traditional retailers. BlueNile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. And BlueNile's bench jewelers will then help you handcraft her perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. Shop stress-free with BlueNile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All BlueNile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with BlueNile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com. Code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com. Code LOCKEDON. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstreicher still here with Spencer Schultz. And let's now dive into studs and duds, Spencer. We'll start offensively in this segment, go into defense next segment. But I did tease that Lamar Jackson will be talked about. So let's talk about him so far this year. Had that unbelievable start to the year for the first 3 weeks, top of the MVP conversation. I guess stat-wise has cooled off. You've mentioned some of those decisions he's made over the course of these last couple of weeks, but he's protected the ball a lot better over these last few weeks. But in terms of stud or dud, Spencer, where do you place Jackson?
I place him as an absolute stud. And he did have, like I mentioned, really just that Giants kind of meltdown. But any quarterback, even in an MVP season, has a poor performance. It is a game where you rarely see someone pitch a perfect season, so to speak. And I don't know, you can look at the yards, you can look at the wins, you can look at all that stuff. I like EPA. I like, QBR. I like some of the advanced stuff a little bit more. When you talk about QBR, he's 5th in the NFL. When you talk about EPA, he, I think, is 6th in the NFL. When you talk about his raw QBR, he is 7th in the NFL. When you talk about points earned, he's up there. When you talk about not turning the ball over after having a little spell of getting erratic, I like that. I mentioned the things mentally taking strides. The one aspect that it feels like is challenging is that it feels like there is just a little bit of pressure in his game and stress to be perfect and make a perfect throw. And I appreciate the passion that I see out of him. You would way rather see him be too involved emotionally than not involved enough. It is always easier to bring someone down than it is to get the dog to come out of someone. And there's never an issue getting that dog to come out. So I appreciate that aspect. But, like I said, I feel like part of that's tied to the contract. I think in the run game, and I think one of the most overlooked aspects of what Jackson does and has done, orchestrating the pre-snap motions, orchestrating the ball fakes and the option pulls and all of the things that he does is really mentally tasking and requires mental consistency and execution, and has done it really, in my opinion, regardless of running back, regardless of zone, regardless of man, regardless of what kind of run concept it is, the best he's done in his career. And I don't think he's trying to be the most elusive runner he's ever been. I think we've seen him, win the battle so that he doesn't prevent himself from winning the war, I guess is the way to put it. I got a first down. I'm just going to go out of bounds or go down even more than he ever has, which that is going to prolong his game. That's what he should be doing. That's a smart thing to do. And he's chosen his spots. He belts off one where he makes 4 guys miss in the Saints game. And that has been super impressive to me. Considering the revolving door of Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews going out and the receivers going out and everything like that, I think it's just held his own, controlled the offense, maybe even more so than he ever has, and been in control of the offense. We see him checking protections. We see him making a ton of checks at the line, killing plays, checking into different things. We see him calling his own number in the run game probably once or twice a game. Which I think is funny considering some of the narratives that were in the beginning of the season. Oh, he doesn't want to run because of the contract. I've watched him check into veers and check into things where it's really not even an option. He's going to pull the ball. So I think he's really managing the game at an incredibly high level, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, I was going to say he does look a lot more in control this year. He looks more confident doing everything now. And I know people will say, oh, he only had 9 completions this game. He only had 22 attempts that game. He's doing it's not all the box score thing. He's doing so much throughout the course of a game, maneuvering the offense, getting everybody into position. And there are a couple things here and there, sure, getting to the line and this, that, and the other. But he has been incredible this year. I think at least he's a stud in my opinion. But let's move on, especially to the running backs. It seems like a lot of people were excited for obviously the returns of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Obviously, Dobbins back on IR. Gus Edwards misses this last game against the Saints with a hamstring. So other guys have to step up. It's Kenyon Drake. It's Justice Hill. Mike Davis gets some run. I think Drake and Hill have been really, really good this year. Drake had a little bit of a rough start, but I think he's really come on. Mike Davis, I guess, is maybe the one you can put in the dud category, but he hasn't really gotten a ton of run over this last month or so, I guess. But where are you with the running backs right now?
Really impressed. I think that I really think the whole group is studs. I mean, J.K. Dobbins comes back and has to go get a cleanup procedure that probably is the best thing in the long run. That's a stud move. Do the best thing in the long run so that you're healthy and get this out of the way now. Gus Edwards has come back, looked amazing, really good. Arguably, I would say their best offensive player in terms of talent coming in. Some of the things he did against the Bucs, and gets the hamstring injury, which is super common when you have ACLs. So considering that injury and what type of player he is and what we've seen from him, stud. Kenyon Drake has gotten into the swing of things. Stud, just flat out, running hard, making smart cuts, able to be explosive enough and speedy enough to carry those Devontae Freeman, okay gains, 4, 5, 6-yard gains from 2021 into 10, 12, 17-yard gains, things of that nature. Justice Hill coming off a torn Achilles, which is usually kind of a kiss of death for running backs, looks explosive as heck and has consistently done so, is a menace on special teams, forces a huge special teams play against the Bucs that allows the Ravens to go get a field goal that ends up being pretty important late in that game. So I'm really impressed by this group. Mike Davis, not a fast guy, not someone who can run away from people, but he's calm and he blocks really well. They've used him as a key blocker in several situations, and you watch him lay a chip that puts a defensive end on their butt yesterday or on Monday. So I think this room is studly. I don't really think there are any duds in this room relative to expectation. And it would be even hard to say that Edwards or Dobbins are duds if they are duds, because what is your expectation? They're coming back off of injury. It's expected that there will be obstacles, hurdles, challenges, shortcomings, all of those kinds of things for one of the most reliant on, being creative laterally with the knee ligaments that are required to do so, and having some issues there. But I think I'm really impressed with this room and have continued to be, especially over the last month or so.
Yeah, that Mike Davis block. Oh man, what a block that was. Then he again, I say it, he catches the ball and gets positive yards out of the play. So just the Mike Davis show over there for that one. But Spencer, let's go pass catchers now. I know a lot of people had super high expectations for Rashad Bateman. He looked great over the first couple weeks of the year. Obviously, injuries kind of derailed his season. He now is done for the year. Devin Duvernay, absolute stud, has stepped up in every sense of the word. But then you have others in there like Demarcus Robinson, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace has not been even getting on the field, hasn't even been active for some of these games here. So that's one where you're kind of wondering, tight end wise, Mark Andrews, we know who Mark Andrews is. But then you have Josh Oliver who stepped up. Isaiah Likely's made some plays. So this pass catcher group, it's interesting. Who do you have as studs and who do you have as duds?
I mean, it's tough. You think about Nick Boyle, and he hasn't gotten a ton of reps. He's come in and tackled a couple guys off the line of scrimmage, things of that nature. It's because Josh Oliver's a stud. He's not getting reps. They like Josh Oliver better, and what he's done in the run game, what he's done as a pass blocker, and considering that he is a better receiving threat, more nimble, more fluid, more generally athletic in that sense than Nick Boyle, it makes sense why they're not playing Boyle. It also probably makes sense that Boyle's probably had a lot of help in the development of a Josh Oliver, because he's had so much help with Pat Ricard and Mark Andrews and a lot of these other Hayden Hurst, these guys turning them into consistent, effective, technically savvy blockers. And Josh Oliver, was giving Myles Garrett some frustrations at one point, and Garrett ends up kind of ragdolling him at the end of plays because he was like, get this guy off of me, like get away from me, stop. So I'm thrilled with what I've seen from Oliver. Likely, obviously, has a ton of hype in the preseason, comes in, feels like he was a little overwhelmed, and everybody's ready to say, oh, another preseason superstar, all those things. So what do the Ravens do? Dial back his snaps a little bit, pick and choose a couple concepts for him, allow him to work in practice at blocking. He ends up emerging, being a really clean blocker as of late as well. So Studley against the Bucs, he was a key contributor and really helps win that game, and then has a big touchdown. The touchdown was kind of wide open, but it's set up by the fact that he sold the block well and sifted through and then broke off at the right time. So relative to being a fourth-round tight end rookie, coming out of, a non-major, or I should say a group of five school, stud. And then Mark Andrews, of course, suffers the injuries. That's been a little tough, but he's carried them at times and made some really big plays and things of that nature. So at this point, stud as well. So really just running backs, tight ends, you got to throw Pat Ricard in one of these two groups, and he's just a human battering ram as usual. He's been available. He's been healthy. He's been willing. He's been able, and has given a lot of linebackers, given a lot of, Brian Baldinger is calling it the 3-guard offense, and Ricard's the 3rd guard. And I think that's a really great way of putting it. So throw him in there as well. So this running back and tight end room, again, relative to expectations of Kenyon Drake and Justice Hill and Josh Oliver and all those guys, they're doing really well, a bunch of studs.
Yeah, and I'll take wide receivers. I think when you're talking about, I feel like Wallace has been pretty disappointing based off of not that he had like sky high expectations, but he was expected to contribute, and he's been, game day inactive, getting guys like Deshaun Jackson over him in some circumstances. Devin Duvernay has, I think, like the embodiment of a stud and like what you want in a stud. He's been everything and more the Ravens have hoped for as a receiver, as a big play threat, as a returner. He's been great. James Prochet has made some plays here and there. I know he was, again, expected to have a bigger role in the offense than he has had so far. I think Demarcus Robinson has looked actually kind of good in certain situations. He stepped up against Tampa. He had 6 catches. So I think even though the group as a whole, people wanted more out of it, they're still getting contributions. I still think they should have added someone at the trade deadline. That was my opinion. But at the same time, I think what Devin Duvernay's brought you, that is kind of the highlight of that group for me so far. But Spencer, let's finally talk about offensive linemen. This group has been incredible to me. I think they have stepped up in such a big way. One of the biggest pleasant surprises, in my opinion. Do you have any duds on that line, or are they all studs to you?
All studs to me. Ben Powers has done a nice job in pass protection. I think he kind of is focused more there than on his run blocking, which was what had actually surprisingly kind of carried his game over a mixed bag of starting over the previous 2 years. I think that Kevin Zeitler didn't look as sharp as he did last year to start the year. It has really come into his own. Didn't have a ton of reps in preseason or anything like that, so it makes a little sense. Pat McCary has just been continued to be one of the most mystifying, underheralded players in the NFL. You just can toss him anywhere on the line. There's maybe 5 guys in the NFL that you can truly play left tackle through right tackle at any given time and have them go compete at a decently high level. Morgan Moses has been what Morgan Moses is, a consistent veteran presence. Is he a world beater? No, but he's not going to get beat to give up 3 quick sacks in a game or 2 quick sacks in a game. He might get beat badly once in a game and, miss a couple run blocks. And then Ronnie Stanley, can't really ask for much more. Still feeling it out in the run game a little bit. He's had some nice pulls. I think that we overrate pulls a little bit. Giving a 300-pound man a running start usually does help them. But in the pass pro game, just has lost nothing. Out of his stance, first steps, explosiveness, flexibility, timing. A couple times it looked like he struggled dropping anchor at times, which might be the result of him being super lean, trying to keep any bad weight off of him that could, hinder his health and his ankle and his entire physiology. But started to pick that up even too. So Stanley playing at a high level. And considering, Linderbaum is a rookie, you couldn't ask for much more, especially the fact that he's a super undersized center. He's fought admirably. He's gotten beaten by some really good linemen, but then he gets back out there. He doesn't let it snowball into, back-to-back bad reps or anything like that. And has had some trouble, getting the ball snapped a couple times, being as urgent as needed. But, those are things, again, that they can sharpen up in the bye week. So it's what they usually say in the NFL is that the second half of the season, you're not a rookie anymore. So these, guys like him, guys like Kyle Hamilton, guys like, I guess not David Ojabo, Likely, Travis Jones, they're not rookies anymore. They're not green. They've been to battle quite a few times. They've got some scars on them now as opposed to coming into the league. So I think this offensive line's been a really strong group, arguably the best in the NFL, and they're giving Lamar Jackson plenty of time. They have a super efficient passing game. I believe they're the 3rd highest pass DVOA team in the NFL. They're up there in EPA, up there in all those kinds of things. And I think a lot of that has to do with this offensive line allowing Lamar Jackson to feel confident. And it's not like Lamar can move out of things, escape things, do some crazy things. Absolutely. He also does force defensive ends and pass rushers to maybe be a little bit more rush with a little more trepidation of over rushing him. But at the same time, he doesn't get the ball out in under 3 seconds nearly as much as most passers do. So you're asking this line to block for a while, to stay engaged, to stay in front of their guy to a degree. And I think they've done an outstanding job. And I think that's a big reason why the Ravens are 6-3.
I 100% agree. And we talked about it all last season, Spencer, all off season. Go build that fortress around Lamar Jackson. And I know last year they went through so many offensive line combinations. Guys were flipping all over the place. They bring in Alejandro Villanueva to play right tackle. He has to move over to the left side for the entire year after week 1. This has been a consistent group for the most part. Guys have gone in and out with injuries. But at the same time, I think these guys have played so well. And I think it's, again, a huge part. I agree with why they're 6-3 right now. But coming up, we'll be diving into the defensive studs and duds for this team in the first half of the season. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is the number one source for sports betting info, news, stats, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all over at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix in. And head to the website to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Spencer Schultz. And Spencer, let's talk defensive studs and duds. Let's start with front seven. So we'll do defensive line. We'll do outside linebackers. We'll do inside guys. The defensive line group has been, I think, really good this year. I think guys like Justin BK has stepped up. Broderick Washington has played really well this year. Travis Jones showing flashes. We know who Calais Campbell is too. But I can't mention this front seven. Tuesday's show was locked on Justin Houston because of what Justin Houston was able to do on Monday night and has done throughout the season. He's a lockdown Ravens legend, so I had to do it. But Justin Houston is the definition of a stud here. And then inside linebacker-wise, Patrick Queen playing super, super well this year. So front seven, Spencer, who are your studs and duds?
Loving what I'm seeing out of Calais Campbell, loving what I'm seeing out of Justin Houston, loving what I'm seeing out of Jason Pierre-Paul, loving what I'm seeing a lot out of Justin Madubuike. Madubuike is consistently harassed, consistently won in the run game, consistently looped and pursued, and it feels like started to have a little bit more competent rushes in the sense of staying where he can still access the quarterback and persuade them away from throwing the ball or things of that nature. Patrick Queen has been a Pro Bowl player this year, in my opinion, very much so. Arguably the best blitzing linebacker in the NFL. He's been good in coverage. He's put himself in position to make 3 interceptions. He famously drops 2 of them. One of them was really bad, but recovered well, consistent reps. He has cut down on missed tackles. He is diagnosing against the run more effectively. He's playing. The game has slowed down so much for him. Still only 23 years old and has been an absolute stud. Really, Malik Harrison, I think, has had a nice year. They're using him in a rotational role. He's playing different positions. He's walking out into will and a nickel and a dime and all these different positions. And he's taken 214 snaps. I think another underrated player is Broderick Washington. There's not a ton of rotational interior defensive linemen that can play against the run. Brent Urban also. When you go look at his PFF grade, it's hilarious because I think it's hard to understand what Brent Urban's being asked to do. And I think what he's asked to do is to simply control 2 gaps wherever the play is going. And if it ends up being, he's obviously on the field a lot more in the run game. He's not someone they prefer on 3rd down and passing downs like that. But when he's out there, he just uses his gigantic wingspan to stay in front of the quarterback, block the lane, and go bat some passes. And we see that result in an interception. So he's taken on double teams really well, all of those kinds of things. And then Travis Jones, I think, is done a really nice job overall. It's hard to say he's at 100% still too. He hyperextends his knee. And when you suffer a knee injury like that causes you to not really be able to practice and things for a while, it doesn't just go away in the middle of the season. It doesn't just stop hurting and stop swelling up and stop tightening up and things like that. So hard to say he's at 100%, but regardless, has been sharp, has been able to stay on the football field. So really impressed with what I've seen from this front 7. I really would say the only one who hasn't quite played up to what they should be doing is Odafe Owe. They asked him to drop into coverage quite a few times this year, as opposed to maybe what he wanted to do or what he actually talked about that he wanted to do that more in the offseason. And it looks like he shed a lot of weight. And to me, when he lost himself at times in his rookie season last year, it was because he got away from using his incredible length and get off to use a long arm bull rush to kind of be his home base, to just, hey, if you keep locating and stabbing that chest plate of the tackle, you're going to force them, if you use your speed and then stab them, you're going to force them to overset. They're going to want to get out of their stance really quickly. And then you're going to force them to try to want to drop anchor. And when they want to drop anchor, you're nimble enough. He's like a basketball athlete where he can then chop or rip or swipe or any of those things. To me this year, he isn't functionally strong enough, and he's been very upright in his rushes. And it can help him see more. It can help him do some different things. I think that he's been good in pursuit. And done some nice things, but just, he's leading them in pressures, and he's had a couple quarterback hits and things like that, but hasn't quite lived up to the billing. So if you're going to point to a dud here, I would say it's Odafe Owe, but now that he's going to be in more of a rotational role, I bet we see him come out of the bye feeling a lot more confident and a lot more effective, being able to pick spots and choose spots for him to be successful.
Yeah, I think Tyus Bowser does a lot in that. Ajabo coming back is going to help out. Great. That's a great breakdown. I do agree with that a lot, Spencer. But let's talk about the secondary. Marlon Humphrey, after a down year by his standards last year, has come back, played really well. Marcus Peters coming off his ACL, I think, has also played well. You looked at the safety room. Marcus Williams was playing great before he went down. Kyle Hamilton has really come into his own now. So do you have any duds in the secondary? Maybe do you think Brandon Stevens or Pepe Williams or Armour Davis, or do you have a lot of guys as studs in that group?
When I think about this, I wanted to say Pepe Williams was a dud. But then again, when you go back and watch his college tape, he plays the game like a 185-pound linebacker. He's not someone that's super effective in terms of turning and running downfield. And I don't know that I don't want to say that he ever will be, but at the same time, it's something he needs to put a lot of work in, transitioning, opening his hips up, being clean in terms of footwork, and understanding when if you're in trail or if you're in zone, when you really want to open up and then pursue and then attack. And he's made some nice plays. He's a really good tackler. I love him in the box, between the numbers, underneath in flats, underneath, sitting in those kind of curl and hook zones, like a linebacker, like a really small, quick linebacker. So I wouldn't call him a dud just because that's what he is, and that's what he was in college. So I think he's playing to expectation in that sense, but we are seeing them go to Kyle Hamilton to go play in a more jumbo nickel look than a dime, and having Kyle Hamilton come up and play in the slot, who I think has been a stud and did have a couple lapses early. Obviously, Geno Stone has taken a ton of pressure off him, who has been a total stud. One of the best players on the Ravens defense this year, especially considering Marcus Williams goes down. Couldn't have asked for a better backup. They might have the deepest safety room that in the NFL that I can remember over the last 5 years. I mean, Hamilton and Stone and Chuck Clark, and then having guys, an Ardarius Washington that feels like has been chomping at the bit. Stevens does some things on top of Marcus Williams when he does come back. I mean, that is just truly ridiculous. And what Geno Stone has done this season, just in terms of consistently doing the right thing, the way he was able to be used as a tool to bait Tom Brady on a key third down against the Buccaneers, and the way that he's pursued, kept him. I mean, how many times have you thought to yourself, wow, oh man, Geno Stone messed up? It's not happening. He's not blowing coverages. And to be a late round pick that bounced around, went to Houston, came back to Baltimore, and to get that shine, it feels a lot like how Chuck Clark was at a certain point in his career in year 3, when the Ravens needed him to step up after Tony Jefferson goes down. So I think that we're seeing Geno Stone cement himself as someone that's going to get a decent sized contract either in Baltimore or elsewhere. And it's interesting. I don't know what's going to happen once Marcus Williams comes back, because you need Geno Stone on the football field. You really want Kyle Hamilton on the football field. And all those guys have been pretty sharp. So I think there's a little, it's tough. I think Chuck Clark does not want to come off the field. He prides himself on being the play caller, all of those things. I think Baltimore Ravens fans obsess over the green dot more than any other fan base does. But it's just going to be tough, man. They've got so many good safeties. Marlon Humphrey, I think the most admirable thing about him is that he tweaked his hamstring pretty badly against the Dolphins to the point where he had to come off the football field, and has been missing practice, been limited, and still is doing what he's doing, still playing such a physical brand of football, and fighting through the catch point, fighting through, recovering. You can tell in his strides, and he is such a spectacular track athlete, track coach, all of those things in the offseason. And you can tell that his strides aren't what they usually are, that he has to shorten up, that he's got a tight hammy, and is still recovering somehow. So fighting through injury, a guy that you're glad you paid and that has matured a ton as a player and a person and all of those things. So Marcus Peters, has had his ups and downs, and I hate when people call him a gambler. I think it's not so much that he's a gambler. It's that he's a really intelligent player, and sometimes he's too smart for his own good, more so, and that he makes a lot of assumptions based on things. And I don't think that makes him a gambler. I remember an adage about Dante Jackson at LSU, and a coach or a GM or a scout was saying, they asked LSU coaches about him, and they said he's the smartest player I've ever been around. He, in film study, can tell quarterbacks what they need to know. Like, he is one of the most intelligent film study players I've ever seen. But when he's in his back pedal, he starts thinking, and a receiver might run by him. So it's kind of, I don't think it's as much of a gambler as that he's so cerebral. It almost hurts him at times, but that's why he's such a good player. So the risk versus reward there, still very much. And I'm curious to see how he responds from a little rest, relaxation. He's had some intense moments over the last couple of weeks, drops an interception, pretty much allowed a touchdown in the Saints game that was an overthrow from Andy Dalton. So again, with injury, it's hard to call him a dud, but would love to see him rise up even more to the occasion. And we saw the Saints. It's like, now that you have Roquan Smith, Tyus Bowser's back, David Ojabo is going to come back. The safeties are playing well. They've got really good linebackers. Marlon Humphrey's playing elite ball on the other side of the field. Who are you going to attack? The Saints chose Marcus Peters, and I think that's something we're going to see more of as they navigate through the rest of the season. So some rest here for him, and see how he responds, and if he can turn it up into being super high level and more consistent is something I'm banking on seeing.
Yeah, I think the bye week came at a great time. I think anywhere on that like week 9 to week 11 sweet spot is really, really good. You don't want it too early. You don't want it too late. I think Baltimore, they got it at a really good time. So hopefully second half of the season, we'll see even more. Their schedule does lighten up, as we talked about and have mentioned. So I think Baltimore has a really good chance here to rattle off even more wins. So Spencer, thank you so much for hopping on again. Thank you so much for joining me here. Please tell people what you're working on. I know that Money Down series has been going well for you.
Yep, Money Downs, looking at all the third downs. Ravens are 6th in offensive third down conversion percentage and 6th in defensive as well. So going back, looking through all those, the tape is dropped. So you'll see the Money Downs on my YouTube page as well as on BaltimoreBeatdown.com, and some fun film stuff coming out on Twitter and on the website. And you can find the Baltimore Beatdown podcast anywhere you get your podcast. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. Give this man 5 stars. Reward the man who gives you the best daily Ravens coverage. And I'll talk to you guys next week or sometime thereafter.
You know where it's going to be. Everything down in the description below. Thank you so much, Spencer. That's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens. We'll get back here tomorrow. We'll be diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.